Good. We'll praise Him with you.
Sorry?
We'll praise Him with you.
And my former in-laws, for some reason, God laid them on my heart to bring them up. He's got, it's a couple, and the man has also has Parkinson's, and the wife she has Alzheimer's real bad, and us are Catholic, that doesn't big help. I mean, I know God hears their prayers coming here at Catholic prayers just as easy because He has ours. But I don't know. I don't see how anybody could be truly saved and be Catholic at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And,
There's definitely some discrepancy there, but we'll pray for their physical healing as well as spiritual guidance as well.
I got one.
You got one?
Linda's not been feeling well this week, and she has a procedure at the heart doctor, I think, Thursday. Knew her, and I have a CT scan Tuesday. So we're falling apart. That's all right.
We'll remember both of you. Tuesday and Thursday, right? All right.
Friday, I got a in-house pacemaker check. I had a phone in one about 3 weeks ago, and they called me and said, we need to see it. So I don't know what that's all about. I'm still alive, so that's,
We'll pray everything goes well with that. Well, if not, that's great. Can I get you to open us up in prayer this morning?
Sure. Our gracious and loving Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much for all that you do for us. We thank you for all your many blessings that you do and keep upon us. And Father, the greatest one of all was when you sent your precious Son Jesus to die in our place, to pay for a debt that we could never repay. Father, it's such a blessing to know that despite the fact that you are the holy God and you are the all-knowing God and all-powerful God, that we can come to you anytime, any place, at any time at all, just to lay our burdens before you. And we know that they're all being considered according to your perfect will. You can take care of our spiritual needs, you can take care of our financial needs, you can take care of our physical needs. Father, we have, you give us the knowledge to know that you can do anything. So Father, I just lift up all the other requests that have been made, and lay them before your feet. I ask you, Father, to please consider them. Father, if it be your will to grant each and every one of them. Father, if it be your not, if it be not your will to do, we just ask, Father, that you just give us the grace and to handle, handle it. Because Father, we know that all things are possible for you. Father, we ask also that you just heal our land, Father, of all the problems that are going on, the violence that seems to be never ending. Father, we know it's not a gut problem or it's not anything else problem. Father, it's a heart problem. Father, until the heart gets healed, nothing else is ever going to be. So Father, we just ask that you just heal our land and bring us back to that place that we used to be, that city on a hill. And once again, that nation again, that you will be proud of. We ask, Father, again, that you would just bless the country of Israel. We ask that you bless the country of Ukraine. Father, just help them as they go through the struggles that they're going through. Father, we thank you so much for what you have done, what you are going to do, and what you are doing. And we just give you all the praise and honor for it. And we ask all these things in your precious Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
all right.
We'll get into our lesson here. Now, I was reading the bulletin and reminded that the Snotterleys, I think, will be here next week. So we got to finish up the entire book of Genesis today. Okay. No, we'll get as far as we get, and we'll be happy with it. I think last week we got through 2 verses, so and I left happy. I don't know about y'all, but so we want to do it justice. We want to study it right, make sure we don't leave anything out. But we are in Genesis chapter 42 this week. Like I say, we got through the first, maybe just the first verse. No, I think we got through the first 2 verses last week there. Lot to talk about here in this chapter. It's definitely one of the more familiar sections of Joseph's story to us, right? This is kind of his the climax of his story, right? When everything comes to a head, and so we're getting into that. But there's a little bit before we get into the depth of it here. So I'm going to read the first 8 verses. I think that's what we read last week as well. But if we get further than that, we'll keep going. But if not, we'll stop there. So starting in verse 1 of chapter 42, says, "Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, Why do you look one upon another? And he said, Behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither, and buy for us from thence, that we may live and not die. And Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sat not with his brethren, for he said, Lest peradventure mischief befall him. And the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those that came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. And Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the earth. And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but he made himself strange unto them, and spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan to buy food. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew him not." Transposed a couple words there at the end, but we're all right. Like I say, we're kind of getting started into this defining moment of Joseph's story, where he has the opportunity to stand before his brothers, see his dreams fulfilled, right? Not necessarily his dreams as in his ambitions, but his literal dreams that he was shown by God, with the sheaves bowing to him, and then the moon and stars bowing to him. And so we see that fulfilled in this chapter. So we talked, like I said, last week about the first 2 verses there. It's kind of fun, a couple verses talking about why are we just looking at each other, why aren't we acting, and then talking about living and not dying, which is seems like a simple choice, but too many people today reject that choice, right? They reject life in favor of temporary happiness and death. But we see in this chapter that Joseph's brothers, Jacob's sons, they don't reject that choice. They obey their father, and they go to Egypt here. They go to buy corn in Egypt, but all except for one, right? It says that in verse 3, it says, Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. I thought Joseph had 11 brothers, right? So we got Benjamin staying behind, right? That's not really a surprise to anybody. If you've been in here studying Joseph, Benjamin is the new favorite. He is the Joseph 2.0, we might say. So Benjamin, it appears, has inherited Joseph's position here among the brethren as far as his favoritism by Jacob, as well as maybe the position in charge of the work.
Weren't Joseph and Benjamin Rachel's only 2 sons?
They were.
He was showing favoritism because he loved Rachel more than me.
Yeah, so Rachel was the favorite wife, and so her sons are the favorite sons, and now she's gone, And so, and now Joseph's gone, so the only reminder he has of Rachel is Benjamin. And so he's going to protect him, hold him close. It's like if we have an heirloom of somebody close to us that's passed away, we might, treasure it.
Plus, he changed his name too. He also changed his name.
Benjamin, yeah. Because she named him son of my sorrow, Benoni, and he named him son of my right hand, kind of remembering Rachel in the name, right? So Benjamin here, I think, is the new favorite. But an important difference between him and Joseph, right, is Joseph, remember, was favored by Jacob. He was put in a high position. Everything that Benjamin is here, but his brothers hated Joseph, right? We don't see here a hatred for Benjamin. Even, throughout this story, if you read ahead, Joseph tells him, hey, bring your other brother to me so that I know you're not lying, so that I know he's actually exists. Really he wants to make sure he's alive. But and they're fearful, right? They're like, oh no, what if something happens to Benjamin? They didn't think that about Joseph. They're like, hey, let's throw Joseph in this hole over here and see what happens.
But Joseph was the one who told them that he would, or they would bow down to him, and he's the one who got the coat of many colors. He got all that stuff, and it doesn't say here that Benjamin got anything like that.
Well, Benjamin might not have had a coat of many colors, but he certainly had the position that the coat represented, right? He certainly had the favored position. As far as the dreams and that kind of thing, I definitely think that played a part in their hatred for Joseph. But you don't go from, hey, this is my brother over here, to I'm going to throw you in a hole and sell you to the slave market over a dream. It doesn't go that fast. So I think they already had some hatred for Joseph before the dreams, just based off of his favored position.
One question I've always had. All right, they said that 10 sons went to Egypt, and Joseph would have been the 11th, and then Benjamin was the last one, and that's 12.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so whenever all right, there's 12 tribes of Israel, but Joseph had 2 sons, and they got his lot. So that's a total of 13.
Well, they would have shared his lot.
Reuben and Simon were cut out.
Were they? Okay.
Read on, find out.
I'd have to look more into it, but okay.
And then also,
That
10 of the brothers wanted to kill him, and only one wanted to save him. Brother 9 wanted to kill him, and brother 1 wanted to save him.
mm-hmm.
The Bible tells us that.
I think,
All of them wanted to kill him but one, and the one won.
yeah, Reuben was the one that wanted to save him. Yeah,
And the rest of them wanted to kill
the
him.
rest of them wanted to kill him, so they compromised and sold him.
The Bible says that Reuben said, I'm going to save him and take him back to his daddy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Reuben had plans to come back to the hole, circle back after everybody left.
was he the oldest?
Reuben?
He was the eldest.
Yeah, because when we were talking about, when they sold Joseph into slavery, when they put him in the pit and everything, Reuben possibly wanted to save him because he felt responsible, right? So if they go back and, oh, there's no Joseph, who's Jacob going to be mad at? He's not going to be mad at Simeon or whoever. He's going to be mad at Reuben, because Reuben's the oldest and he's supposed to be the one in charge.
Well, Levi also didn't get any inheritance either. Their inheritance was of the Lord.
Yeah, he didn't get any land inheritance, yeah.
But it's still, but even in when the land when they divvied up, all of them, even the tribe of Reuben and the tribe of Simeon got something, and they still got land.
Mm-hmm.
So is that? Are you saying that only Manasseh and
Ephraim.
just only got half?
I'd have to look more into it, but if I know Levi didn't get any land because he got the priesthood, right? And so he didn't get any land. He got what the others brought to him, right? That was his inheritance, and so that would have made it 11, and then you split Joseph's into two, Manasseh and Ephraim. That makes it 12.
The 12 tribes of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like I said, I've always wondered why he told us to be 13. I mean, even if you do consider half and half.
Do what?
Manasseh's tribe got divided in half.
Yeah.
It's split off.
I think
It's very complicated.
as we go further through the genealogies, they're all going to split, right? It's not going to be, a single descendant of each person, right? So,
Was it like Manasseh that split whenever they went over the river Jordan?
Yeah.
I think it was Reuben and I think it was Simeon.
Mhm.
Tribes stayed behind because they were basically cattle. They had more cattle than anything. And the land before Jordan was more grassland stuff like that. So they said, hey, we want this. Y'all can go ahead. And that's where they split.
mhm. Yeah. But I think as far as like the 12 tribes, I think going off the original, the 12 sons of Jacob is where the 12 tribes comes from, right? And then after that point, they're going to split. They're going to branch off, some of them. That's my best answer for you. I know it's not the best answer, but it's my best.
Like I said, I've always questioned that one because I can't. I read and read and read, and it's like 12 tribes, and there's 13. So I've always questioned that one. I know. I'm not going to question God's word, but it's just I know it's in there somewhere, but I just haven't found it.
Right. There's a lot of stuff, we see these people that attack Christianity, right? They'll point out things that appear to be contradictions, but once you study in depth into them, they're not. They make sense, right? And so when it comes to deciphering it, we just got to study it more and ask God to help us, right?
I'm sure it hasn't been, I blame myself because I haven't studied enough to actually find it. I know it's there.
Yeah, I feel like it'd be something you'd have to really look into that, as far as, focus on that one thing and kind of follow the trail.
Right.
But anyway, Benjamin here, he stays behind, and the other brothers are going to Egypt to buy corn. There's kind of a subtle thing that I've never really noticed when I read through this, but kind of I noticed it this past time when I was studying. In verse 5 there, it says, the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those that came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. So I think somebody even mentioned this in here a while back, and I've kind of wondered it myself. If Joseph had all these officers under him, why do the brothers get presented directly to Joseph to buy their corn? And I think verse 5 answers that for us here. And we got to kind of look a little closer into it. It says they came to buy corn among those that came. And then it says, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. So what I'm reading here is that they came as part of a group from Canaan. There was famine in the land of Canaan, and either they traveled as a group from Canaan to avoid, for protection. I think that's probably the less likely because the people of Canaan didn't really like these brothers, right? I think the more likely is that when they came to Egypt, they maybe came to one of these officers to buy corn, and the officer's like, oh, you're not Egyptian, you're from Canaan, you're an outsider. I don't know what to do with you. Let me take you to my superior. And so they just grouped all these people that weren't Egyptians, that were Canaanites or wherever they were from. And they brought them before Joseph, and they said, hey, we're taking care of the Egyptians, but these guys, they're not Egyptian. I don't know what to do with them. They're yours, you know. And so to me, this verse here, verse 5, explains how they got put in front of Joseph himself. So I'm thinking from Joseph's point of view now, trying to. And if I'm Joseph and I know my brothers are in the land of Canaan, I've not seen them for a while, and somebody says, hey, here's all these people from Canaan, I'm going to be like, my family might be in there, you know. And so then I'm going to divide them into family groups. And so we see when the brothers are presented before Joseph, they're presented just as the brothers, right? They're not presented as the brothers and the Canaanites or all the outside non-Egyptians. They're presented into family groups here. We see that Joseph's brethren came in verse 6. And so he's divided these people up into their family groups, I think, with hopes of finding his brothers. And so they are presented before Joseph. They bow down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. I thought that was interesting. So they would have done this before Pharaoh or a king or whoever in power. And normally Egyptians, kissing the ring. Normally Egyptians would have done this because Pharaoh is considered a god, right? And so they want to basically worship him is what they're doing. So these brothers, they're not doing that to worship Joseph. He is in Pharaoh's stead here. He has the ring, and he's deserves the respect that is normally due Pharaoh. But they're not bowing down to worship him as a god. They're bowing down out of respect and to keep from angering him. You know.
There was some humility there too.
You want to explain a little more?
Humbling themselves and to vow, not even knowing that it was Joseph, just the fact that when we're in need, we humble ourselves before God. Right? Joseph is not a God. But sometimes we have to humble ourselves before our friends and our brethren, even family, when we bear, that we have to apologize. We may not get down on our knees with our face to the ground, but we have to humble ourselves enough to admit that I was wrong.
Yeah, I like that. I like what you said, because even though they don't know that Joseph is Joseph, they know that they think that he's some Egyptian high guy, you know. They're humbling themselves is part of their remediation, we would say, maybe.
I think partly, mostly it has to do with the fact that y'all got food, we don't.
Well, I think that's why they're doing it, yeah. But certainly to get the food, they would have to, you know, be very humble, and you know, you can't go in there like, yeah, I'm sons of Jacob, and I think you should give me all the corn I can carry. You know, that ain't gonna work. Yeah, that's the attitude they need. But you know, I think if we're looking in the bigger picture here of this story, not the big picture, the smaller big picture here, of Jacob's brother, or Jacob's sons, and Joseph, and all of this. So the brothers have done Joseph wrong. There's too many J names, all right? I'm going to call Joseph Jacob here. But they've done Joseph wrong. And let me just, I wrote down a quote from Henry Morris, the study Bible that he has on, it's actually on his commentary on verse 7. he's talking about Joseph, where it says he made himself strange unto them and spake roughly unto them. And he says, why did he have to speak roughly unto them? Why was he being mean to them? And here's his quote. It's a little bit here, but it's not too bad. Just bear with me. It says, "It seems very likely that Joseph knew that his brothers would eventually have to come to him to buy grain, and had planned how he would handle the situation when they would finally appear, no doubt after much thought and prayer. He was most concerned that God's promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob be fulfilled in the descendants of Israel, but this would first require full reconciliation of all the family members to each other. He was not seeking revenge, but restoration, and this would necessarily require recognition of their sin by his brothers, followed by forgiveness by himself. Accordingly, the several stages of his plan to bring this about were set in motion at this time." And so he's saying, in Joseph acting the way he did, the brothers acting the way they did, him speaking roughly to them and not letting them know who he is working for their good, right? Because they have to come to some kind of reconciliation here. He's not, when you first read this, you're like, oh, Joseph sees his brothers. He says, this is my chance. I'm going to be mean to him. I'm going to talk roughly. You think he's talking about revenge, here. He's getting his payback. And we see later on he throws them all in jail for 3 days, right? That kind of looks like payback, but it's not. It's part of God's plan, right, for this. And God is using Joseph to fulfill that plan of reconciliation among the children of Israel, to carry on that promise that was given to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob here. And so I liked his phrasing of it there, but it's all for the bigger purpose, right? They're humbling themselves. That's part of that reconciliation. They have to humble themselves in order to gain that forgiveness from Joseph, right? If they come in there laughing at him and recognize that he's Joseph, and they're like, hey, I thought we killed you off a long time ago, he's probably not going to forgive him. I mean, human nature takes over at some point, right? Joseph is a very patient and forgiving man, as we've already seen, but at some point that line snaps, the straw that breaks the camel's back, that might have played a little closer to home in these days when they actually carried straw on camels' backs, I guess. But
Yeah, but even Joseph.
oh yeah. I mean, he was, for all intents and purposes, he was Pharaoh, so he could have said, I don't like these people. Take them away, have them executed. He could have been very cruel to them, but I don't think he wanted that. Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, my opinion, and I could see where, that quote is good. Yes, I mean, if he's done things great, then he got those.
Well, Well, I think if we remember back just a few verses into the last chapter, when he has his sons, right? When he has Manasseh, he names him Manasseh. It says in verse 51 of chapter 41, it says, Joseph called the name of his firstborn Manasseh, for God, said he, hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. So, he's already in his heart forgiven his brothers of what they've done to him, and he says that God has allowed him to do that. God has shown him the bigger plan, right? At this point, he's already in his position of power. He's out of the slavery and the prisons and everything else. And so he recognizes that God was protecting him. God was with him through all of it. And that even his brothers throwing him in that pit and selling him to the slavers and everything that they did was part of God's plan. And so I believe he's already forgiven them. But we do tend to, when we read this section, we tend to say, oh yeah, Joseph's just getting even with them here. He's getting a little bit of payback. And I'll admit that's how I've always read it as well. But it is, I think, that Henry Morris commentary there helps us maybe to look at the bigger picture, more what's going on rather than what's going on right then.
Henry Morris is saying that you had to get them lost to get them saved.
Yeah.
To get them to admit they were sinners.
Yeah.
They started admitting, well, look, this is what we did to our brother. They started confessing big time.
I don't think they confess until they know who Joseph is. They don't confess to them doing it. They do say, when he starts questioning him, they say, yeah, we're 12 brothers, one's back at home and one is lost. Meaning that he's dead. They believe him to be dead. But yeah, they do.
Well, even the brothers even questioned, okay, once they found out that this was Joseph, first thing they thought is, we're in deep trouble here.
Yeah.
And then they probably thought, well, once Jacob gets down there, well, okay, now Jacob would not let Joseph do anything. But then Jacob dies. And another thing they think is, okay, here comes the revenge now.
Yeah.
But Joseph tells them, no, that's not going to happen. So they're still doubting their minds.
Yeah.
Even up to the end.
Well, I can imagine if you've ever done something as bad as they have or close to it to somebody, and then you see that person again, you think, oh no. And especially if they're in a position to do something equally terrible to you or worse or some form of punishment, and they can be in the right about it, legally anyway. If he would have said, hey, let's throw these people in jail, nobody would have questioned him. Nobody would have said, oh no, you're wrong to throw them in jail. You're wrong to execute them. Nobody would have done that. So he would have been legally in the right. Now, as far as morally, I don't think so.
You're right. Nobody's going to question that.
Yeah.
Even if he wasn't, Pharaoh, he's the one with all the grain. He's the one keeping everybody alive. No, we're not. You do whatever you want to, man. Just keep giving me the food.
Yeah, and so I think I would be fearful if I was in their situation, I mean, that's kind of how we should be with God, right? God's forgiven us, but we've done such terrible things against God with our sins that he has no reason to forgive us, right? Joseph has no reason to forgive his brothers. And so they've done terrible things to him. They've not, I think I would be fearful if I was his forgiveness at this point. And so, I mean, that's kind of how we should be with God, right? He's in that position. He could just wipe us out and be totally justified, right? But he doesn't. He forgives us and he saves us. He provides us that grain. He provides us sustenance.
It also goes on to say, paraphrasing, that you meant it to me for harm, but God meant it for good. In other words, this is all God's plan.
Yeah, and Joseph sees that. He sees that, at this point anyway, and I think throughout, he saw that God was in control. And let's think, now he sees this was meant for good. God meant good for me. He meant good for all the people of Egypt. He meant good for all the people of the world by doing this because of this famine that was coming. But let's say we're thinking in Joseph's mind when he's in prison. What's he thinking then? Is he thinking, man, God means this for good for me? He means this for good for all the people of the world? Probably not at that point, but he is thinking God's in control. God knows what he's doing, and God's better at doing what he's doing than I am, so I'm going to let him be in control.
That might have meant good for the whole world because that's where the food came from.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in his mind, I don't know. I think it's for Israel because he told Abraham that I'm going to make you a great nation. That hasn't happened yet,
Mm-hmm.
but it will
Yeah.
in 400.
Well, I do think that's part of it, and I think that's what he sees. I think maybe that realization comes to him right here when his brothers are presented before him. He says, hey, God meant this for the soon-to-be nation of Israel, right? He meant this to be good for my family.
Well, that he had to fulfill prophecy too, because the thing is, whenever I think it's in Hosea where it says that a savior will come out of Egypt. I mean, if it wasn't, he had to save Egypt, so Mary and Joseph would have a place to run to,
Mm-hmm.
and they took Jesus with them too, and they stayed down there for until Herod died.
Mm-hmm.
So if Egypt falls, then Mary, Joseph, and Jesus has no place to go to.
Well, of course, that prophecy even was made long after Joseph's time, but Joseph didn't have to know the specifics of God's plan, right? Even when Joseph was in prison and when he was a slave to Potiphar, he didn't know the specifics of God's plan. He didn't know that he was going to go from being a slave to being in prison to be ruler of Egypt. I mean, he didn't know these specifics. He just knew that God had a plan. And, we don't know the specifics. I don't know, what's going to happen when I leave this building today. I don't know what's going to happen in the next hour, I assume Trevor's going to get up and preach, but he might get up and say, nope, Mr. Millman's going to preach today, So, we could have, I don't know, some great preacher, seriously Billy Graham, but he ain't going to walk through the door. Anyway, somebody come in and Trevor say, hey, this is a great preacher, I'm going to let him preach today, we don't know, but I do know that God has a plan, and I think that plan involves us getting a good sermon out of the next hour, right? But it's not up to me, and it's certainly not for me to know, right? And so Joseph might not have known that prophecy was coming about Egypt, and so he might not have known, hey, I'm doing this to save Egypt for this prophecy. He just knew, hey, God has a plan for Egypt. God has a plan for me. God has a plan for Israel. God has a plan for all of us. And he's worked out this plan with my life. Speaking from Joseph's point of view, he's worked out this plan with my life to provide for his plan for everyone else. And so, I think I said this before, but Abraham, he had great faith to walk out on his own, leave his family, and just go when God told him to go. I mean, God didn't even tell him where to go. He just said go, and he goes. Isaac had great faith. Jacob had great faith. But I think Joseph had the greatest faith because his entire life was struggle after struggle after struggle, and he just kept trusting God through it all. And he just kept seeing not necessarily where it was going, but it's like, if you take a step and there's nothing there. Y'all ever been to the Grand Canyon? Anybody? You have? I've never been, but they've supposedly got this glass bridge over the Grand Canyon. Did y'all go on that? No? I would be terrified. I wouldn't do it. I don't have faith in that glass. I have faith in God, but I don't have faith in that glass. Anyway, so, you're looking down, you see that glass there, and there's nothing. You just see the empty Grand Canyon. Supposedly, I've never been there again, but you got to take that step, And like I say, I don't have faith in that glass, so I ain't taking that step. But if God's standing there, And he says, take that step. I'm going to take that step, you know. And that's what Joseph was doing. He looked down and he saw nothing but trouble. He saw nothing for the rest of his life but prison, slavery, death, anything bad. And he just kept taking those steps. And
The fact that every time he started getting good, something bad always happened.
Mhm.
Because he was thrown in the pit, that's bad. Then he was sold into slavery, that's bad. Then he went from that to the head of the house, so then he got good. And then he got lied on, then it went bad again. He went back to prison. Then he got good again, then he was the head of the prison. And then from there he went.
I don't know that I'd say it ever got good. You know, it got decent, right? Because he may be the head of the slaves, but he's still a slave. You know, and he may be a head of the prison, but he's still a prisoner. You know, and so he does, I think, get some little reprieves. Maybe he gets a little break. You know, if you're.
Well, he said that he was head of the. I mean, Potiphar thought him. You know, there was none higher in the house than he was.
Mhm.
So I mean, he's at the top of the food chain right there.
Well, but just like you were talking about that glass over the Grand Canyon, you still have to take that first step of faith.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're getting ready to cross the Jordan River, what they have to do, I mean, it was flood season, the water was high. It was when they put the foot in the water.
Mhm.
You have to take that first step.
Yeah.
Faith.
Yeah, I think we see a lot of examples like that in the Bible here. Some of them literal like that, you know. But I think Joseph is my favorite. And Trevor was saying something. I think the last time I said that about that book that I think Scott Pauley is writing or wrote. God was with Joseph. I looked it up and I couldn't find it. So it's not out yet, apparently. So, but I'm going to get it when it comes out because I like studying Joseph here. But I do believe he has the most faith of any of the Genesis patriarchs here, in my opinion. But anyway, well, I think it's about time for us to close here. Anybody got any final comments?
Well, I know Genesis covers a lot of stuff, and that is one of the best books in the Bible.
It's definitely a good one. I'm enjoying studying through it. Hope y'all still are.